Never mess with a girl who knows how to operate a 2-ton industrial pallet jack. A wealthy, arrogant woman learned this the hard way when she flipped me off, and later found her luxury car floating 4 feet off the ground. The human brain has a funny way of protecting you from the truth. You can look directly at a monster, and your mind will convince you it's just a shadow. For a long time, I believed that most people were inherently decent. I believed that respect was a universal currency, that if you did your job well and treated others with basic human dignity, the world would return the favor. But a few summers ago, on a small, wealthy island off the coast, a woman in a shiny red convertible completely shattered that illusion. She taught me that to some people, your hard work, your sweat, and your safety mean absolutely nothing compared to their minor convenience. But more importantly, I taught her what happens when you push a quiet worker just a little too far. Let me set the scene for you. This island was a beautiful place, but it lived a double life. In the winter, it was a peaceful, isolated sanctuary. The locals knew each other by name, the streets were empty, and life moved at a slow, predictable crawl. But when June arrived, the island transformed into a playground for the ultra-wealthy. Multimillionaires, CEOs, and entitled tourists flooded the docks. They brought their yachts, their expensive sports cars, and an attitude that suggested they owned every square inch of the land, including the people working on it. At the time, I was 19 years old. I was working at the island's primary commercial hub, a high-end premium grocery and boutique catering facility that supplied all the luxury estates and yachts on the waterfront. It was a massive operation disguised as a rustic island market. I wasn't working on the floor interacting with the wealthy shoppers. No, I was the night logistics manager and store receiver. My domain was the loading dock at the back of the building. It was a stressful, high-stakes job, and my entire day revolved around one single, terrifying variable: the noon delivery truck. You see, logistics on an island are entirely dependent on the ferry schedule. The main delivery truck, a massive semi-truck loaded with tons of fresh produce, dairy, and heavy goods, came across from the mainland on the 11 o'clock ferry. It would arrive at our loading dock exactly at noon. I had a brutally strict window of time. I had exactly 55 minutes to completely unload the new inventory, organize the warehouse, reload the truck with hundreds of empty wooden shipping pallets, crushed cardboard bundles, and commercial waste, and get that truck back out the door. If the truck left even 3 minutes late, it would miss the return ferry. If it missed that ferry, it would be stuck on the island for 6 hours, delaying deliveries across the entire region and costing our business thousands of dollars in penalties. Time wasn't just money. Time was a ticking time bomb. Because of this, the loading bay was a sacred zone. It wasn't a parking lot. It was an active, dangerous industrial area. The loading dock itself was built at a wicked steep angle. Pushing a 2-ton industrial manual pallet jacked down that concrete ramp required intense focus and physical strength. One wrong move, and a pallet of heavy milk crates could easily crush a person. To protect my workspace, I developed a strict routine. Every single day, precisely 30 minutes before the truck was scheduled to arrive, I would walk out onto the asphalt and place 3 massive, 3-foot-tall, bright orange traffic cones right in the center of the loading bay. They were impossible to miss. They practically screamed, "Do not park here." For the first few weeks of the summer, it worked perfectly until Victoria showed up. It was a scorching Friday afternoon in July. The island was packed, and the traffic near the harbor was a nightmare. I had just finished setting up my 3 massive orange cones and went inside to prepare my digital receiving logs. Through the high-definition security monitor mounted above my desk, I saw a flash of bright, obnoxious red. A luxury convertible pulled up to the back of the building. I watched in sheer disbelief as the driver, a middle-aged woman with expensive sunglasses, a designer sun hat, and an aura of supreme arrogance, didn't even slow down. She drove her front bumper directly into one of my 3-foot cones, knocking it flat onto the concrete, and parked her car squarely in the center of the loading dock. I dropped my clipboard, pushed through the heavy rubber warehouse doors, and ran outside. The summer heat hit my face, but my anger was hotter. I walked up to the car just as she was opening her door. "Excuse me, ma'am," I said, keeping my voice professional but firm. "You cannot park here. This is an active commercial loading dock. The semi-truck is arriving in 15 minutes, and you are blocking the entire bay." She didn't even look at me. She stayed seated, adjusting her designer bag, and then finally turned her head. She looked at my stained work shirt and my steel-toed boots with absolute disgust. "I'm just running inside to pick up a catering order," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "It will take 5 minutes." "It doesn't matter if it takes 5 seconds," I replied. "The truck cannot turn into the bay if your car is here. There are public parking spaces right around the corner." She stepped out of the convertible, slammed the door, and looked me dead in the eye. "Listen, girl, I know Arthur, the owner of this establishment. He is my neighbor in the estates. I spoke to him earlier, and he told me it was perfectly fine for me to park here. So, go back inside and do whatever it is you do." Before I could say another word, she turned on her heel and strutted into the main entrance of the store, leaving her car directly in the path of my incoming delivery. Now here's the thing about Arthur. Arthur was a fantastic boss. He was self-made, tough, and fiercely protective of his employees. But more importantly, I knew Arthur's schedule. He hadn't even arrived on the island yet that morning. His private boat wasn't due until 1 p.m. Victoria was boldly, shamelessly lying to my face. I walked into the front of the store, approached the head cashier, and told her exactly what was happening. I instructed every single cashier on duty not to let Victoria check out or pay for her catering order until she went outside and moved her vehicle. 10 minutes later, Victoria came fuming out of the store, empty-handed, her face turning as red as her convertible. She screamed a few choice words at me, hopped into her car, and tore out of the parking lot, spraying gravel everywhere. The next morning, Arthur arrived at the warehouse early. He walked into my office and said, "Hey, I heard there was an issue with a customer in the loading dock yesterday." I didn't hide anything. I told him the absolute truth. I told him about the cones, the truck schedule, and how she claimed he gave her personal permission. Arthur let out a loud laugh. "Permission? She's my neighbor, yes, and she is incredibly annoying. I never gave her permission to block my business." He paused, looking out at the dock. "Look, she's a customer and a neighbor, so please don't have her car towed by the local authorities. It causes too much legal drama. But since it's a convertible and it's quite light, if she does it again, I don't see why you can't just release her emergency brake and push it out of the way yourself." He smiled, patted my shoulder, and walked away. Arthur had just given me a license to play the game, and exactly 1 week later, Victoria decided to play. It was the following Friday. The noon truck was 10 minutes away. Like clockwork, the red convertible appeared. Victoria pulled up, saw my 3 orange cones, and purposefully drove over 2 of them this time. She parked directly facing the warehouse doors. She stepped out of her car, looked directly up at the security camera where she knew I was watching, and slowly, deliberately, raised her hand and flipped me off. She smirked, adjusted her hat, and disappeared into the store. She thought she was untouchable. She thought her wealth and her neighborly status made her a god on this island. I didn't get angry. I smiled. I walked out into the warehouse and grabbed 2 of the biggest guys from the grocery department. "Boys," I said, "Arthur's neighbor needs a lesson in parking." We walked out to the convertible. Because the top was down, I reached over the door, popped the center console, and pulled the lever to release her mechanical handbrake. We put our hands on the trunk, and with one massive collective push, we rolled her little red sports car straight across the concrete lot. We pushed it into a narrow, awkward corner right beside the dumpster. It barely left enough clearance for the incoming semi-truck to back into the dock. 2 minutes later, the massive delivery truck arrived. The driver, who knew about the ongoing drama, backed up perfectly, positioning the giant rear doors of the trailer inches from our warehouse opening. In doing so, the massive body of the semi-truck completely, utterly boxed Victoria's car into that narrow corner. She was trapped. She couldn't leave even if she wanted to. 20 minutes into the unloading process, Victoria came marching into the back of the warehouse. She bypassed the giant employees only signs, her eyes wide with rage. She was screaming at the top of her lungs, demanding to know who touched her vehicle. At that exact moment, I was navigating a massive 2-ton industrial pallet jack loaded to the ceiling with heavy glass bottles and milk crates down the steep, angled concrete ramp. It was a dangerous, momentum-heavy load. Victoria, blinded by her tantrums, stepped directly into my blind spot, right into the path of the descending pallet. If that heavy metal jack hit her, it would have shattered both of her legs. I didn't have time to brake. In a split-second reflex to save her life, I yanked the handle sideways and jammed my own right foot directly under the heavy steel wheels of the pallet jack to force it to a violent stop. The wheel jumped over the steel toe of my shoe and landed squarely on the soft flesh of my foot. The pain was blinding. White-hot agony shot up my leg. I let out a guttural, primal scream. "Get the hell out of my loading bay before you get killed," I roared. She was so utterly shocked, so terrified by the sheer volume and raw anger of my voice, that she actually turned around and ran out of the building. I managed to finish the shift on a pure adrenaline, but by the evening, my foot was swollen to the size of a football. The next afternoon, I came into the store for just a few minutes. My shift manager had already approved a couple of days off for me to heal, and I had already visited the hospital. Fortunately, nothing was broken, but the deep tissue bruising was severe. I needed to hand in my official workers' comp forms. As soon as I limped through the back doors, the assistant manager told me Arthur wanted to see me in his office immediately. I walked up the stairs, my heart pounding slightly. I opened the door, and Arthur was sitting behind his desk, looking incredibly serious. "Sit down," Arthur said gently, noticing my heavy limp. I received a very lengthy, very angry phone call from Victoria last night. She claims that you illegally moved her vehicle, blocked her in, and then verbally assaulted her, screaming obscenities at her in front of other staff. She is demanding that I fire you immediately, or she will take legal action against the store. I looked at Arthur, took a deep breath, and said, Arthur, did she happen to mention why I was screaming? No, Arthur replied. She just said you lost your temper because she parked in your dock. I leaned forward. Arthur, before I say anything, please open the security logs from yesterday, between 11:45 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. There are 3 different angles on the dock, and 2 inside the warehouse. Just watch the tapes. Arthur didn't hesitation. He turned to his computer, clicked a few keys, and pulled up the footage. Together, in absolute silence, we watched the drama unfold. He saw Victoria arrive. He saw her purposefully run over my cones. And then, he saw her look directly into the lens of the camera, raise her hand, and flip me off with that smug smile. Arthur's jaw tightened. Then I told him to switch to the interior warehouse camera. He watched as Victoria illegally marched past the restricted doors. He watched me guiding the massive, heavy milk pallet down that treacherous, steep ramp. And then, he saw Victoria step directly into harm's way. He watched the exact moment I sacrificed my own foot, jamming it under the wheel to prevent a multi-ton industrial accident from crushing his neighbor. He saw me fall to the floor in agony, yelling at her to get out. Arthur stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, he looked down at my bare ankle, which was covered in deep purple and black bruises. The contrast between Victoria's story and the raw reality on the screen was undeniable. She forgot to mention that part. Arthur said, his voice dangerously quiet. He closed the laptop. You saved her from a hospital bed, and you protected this business from a massive liability lawsuit. If you wanted to, you could sue us or take months of paid leave, and you would be fully within your rights. I don't want to sue, Arthur, I said. I just want to do my job without dealing with her. Arthur looked at me with immense respect. Go home, take your days off, heal your foot. And if Victoria ever sets foot on this property again, I will handle it personally. If she blocks that dock, you don't push it. You call a tow truck immediately. A week passed. My foot healed enough for me to walk without a limp, and I was back at my station. It was Friday afternoon once again. The air was salty, the sun was hot, and the noon truck was on its way. I put out my 3 orange cones, standing guard near the entrance. Like a ghost haunting a graveyard, the red convertible appeared. But this time, Victoria had a new strategy. She saw the cones, and she knew she couldn't park directly in the bay without getting blocked by the semi-truck. So, instead, she drove over to the side of the loading dock and parked directly in front of our massive commercial dumpster. Now there were no orange cones in front of the dumpster, but parking there effectively blocked the wide turning radius that the giant semi-truck needed to safely back into the narrow dock. She stepped out of the car. This time, she had put the convertible's leather top up and rolled up the windows. She looked at me, gave me that exact same elation smile, flipped me off for the 3rd time, and walked into the store. She thought she had found a legal loophole. She thought she won. I didn't say a single word. I didn't yell. I didn't even blink. I quietly walked inside and called the local towing company, but fortune favors the petty. The tow truck operator informed me that there was a massive accident on the main island highway, and they wouldn't be able to reach our location for at least an hour. The delivery truck was due in 5 minutes. I couldn't wait an hour. I walked out into the yard. I looked at her car. Then I looked at the massive stack of heavy industrial wooden shipping pallets sitting near the warehouse door. A glorious, beautiful, diabolical idea formed in my mind. I called the produce guy and the grocery clerk. "Boys," I said, "bring me 3 of the sturdiest, thickest wooden pallets we have, and grab the heavy-duty industrial hydraulic pallet jack. A standard manual pallet jack can lift up to 5,000 pounds. Victoria's little red convertible weighed barely 3,000 pounds. We rolled the long steel forks of the pallet jack completely under the center frame of her luxury car. I gripped the handle, engaged the hydraulic pump, and began to push down. Clank, clank, clank. With every pump of my arms, the hydraulic fluid compressed, and to the absolute amazement of the guys, the front tires of the luxury red convertible slowly, smoothly lifted off the concrete. We pushed the jack forward, sliding a heavy wooden pallet underneath. Then, we lifted the rear. We worked with military precision, completely silent, fueled by pure, unadulterated poetic justice. Within 10 minutes, we had successfully maneuvered her car across the lot and dropped it perfectly on top of a heavy, triple-stacked layer of thick wooden shipping pallets. Her expensive sports car was literally sitting on a wooden throne, floating 4 feet in the air. The tires were spinning uselessly in the empty atmosphere. There was absolutely no physical way she could drive it off that stack without tearing the entire undercarriage and transmission out of the vehicle. It was a masterpiece of warehouse engineering. Just as we finished, the main delivery truck arrived, backed into the bay flawlessly, and we began our work. Half an hour later, the screams began. Victoria came out of the store looking around for her car, only to find it elevated like a museum exhibit in the middle of the parking lot. The sheer volume of her screeching brought the entire store management team outside. A few minutes later, Arthur's private boat docked, and he walked up to the scene. He didn't even look at me. He didn't ask a single question. He took one look at the red convertible sitting proudly on top of the shipping pallets, let out a massive booming laugh, and walked straight up to Victoria, who was red-faced and hyperventilating. "Victoria," Arthur said, his voice echoing across the parking lot, "you have repeatedly defaced my property, endangered my staff, and obstructed my business operations. You are officially banned from this establishment, from my neighborly view, and from this entire property forever. If you don't leave right now, I will have the police arrest you for trespassing." She looked around, realizing that her wealth, her expensive car, and her petty status meant absolutely nothing to the people who actually kept this island running. She had to wait nearly 2 hours in the hot sun for a specialized flatbed truck to arrive and safely lift her car off my wooden throne. Was it petty? Absolutely. Was it rewarding? Beyond words. The next morning, I checked my digital payroll stub. Arthur had quietly added a 10-cent per hour raise to my contract, and he never once mentioned the pallets. I guess even the richest people on the island eventually learn that everyone has a breaking point. And mine just happened to be made of solid wood. Thank you for listening to today's Chronicle of Justice. If you enjoyed how the tables turned on the island, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a comment down below, and let me know. What would you have done if someone blocked your loading dock? Until next time, remember, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. This is Day of Reckoning.